This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, and I'm your host, Kait Lamphere. Today I'm joined by two prolific comic book readers, Paloma Deerfield.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Kait Scotchless.
Hello.
And today we are talking about the Goodreads February theme of the month, which is popular comics you haven't read yet. And if you are not part of our Goodreads group and you are on Goodreads, we are under the name I Read Comic Books, shockingly. And we have about 1,300 members, and it's pretty active over there. So if you're on Goodreads, go ahead and check that out. We'd love to have you. And Kait, let's start with you. What did you read for our episode today?
Last time I was on, we were talking about going back to my original episode, and I had been talking about wanting to read V for Vendetta, and then never had, and it's been over a decade. So I picked that up from the library. This is the classic from Alan Moore and David Lloyd. David Lloyd famously co-authored it. He also illustrated it. And I don't know, y'all. This one just, I think, isn't for me. It's for somebody, but... So it was originally published in 1982 through 1985 in black and white, as an ongoing serial in the British anthology Warrior. And then it got the 10-issue color limited series in DC Comics in the US. And since then, it was published under Vertigo until that shut down, and now it's DC Black Label. And that should have given me some clues as to what I was going to read, and the fact that it's written by Alan Moore. But I was just remembering fond memories of Natalie Portman as in 2005 in the movie. So the thing for me is that it has all of the tons and tons and tons and tons of use of the trope of violence against women, to the extreme that you find in these older, edgy books, right? So in the first 100 pages, even though we are set in a dystopian post-nuclear war, I don't know what it's post-apocalyptic, but post-nuclear war fascist police state. And the only way we can figure out how to show that bad guys are bad is by having them be shown as to be pedophiles harming little girls, or wife abusers to the extreme, trying to kill their wives and stuff.
God.
Which, it's just beyond being, stuff that I'm just, not interested in reading at this point in time. We have enough, I have the NPR app. I have enough of that on my feed. I also just find it so unoriginal and boring. You're telling me in this, cool dystopian world, that's the only way you could figure out to show all these different men are bad guys that deserve to be killed by V. So that just, I don't know. I gave it just over 100 pages and then stopped reading. Maybe I'll finish it someday just for the sake of completionism. But for now, there's enough depressing stuff in the world. I really don't need it, which is funny because I saw this on multiple lists that, how all those lists come out after Trump takes office, both last time and this time, of what you should read. And this was on some of them. I'm like, who would want to read this right now? It's just the whole thing is that men are bad. I'm like, I know. I know I don't need a book about it. I don't know. It's on the top 100 English language comics of the century from Comics Journal. It was on the BBC News list in 2019. It was on the list of 100 most influential novels. To me, the thing that stands out the most is the Guy Fawkes Max became really popular after the 2005 movie and it was adopted first by Anonymous and then by a lot of protest groups around the world. And famously, Alan Moore hates the movie. He was really mad at the changes they made because they turned it, as he said, into a Bush era parable about people, the bad guys being the conservatives and the good guys being the Democrats, whereas his V for Vendetta is fascism versus anarchy, true anarchy, right? And V is very much not a good guy, and they turn him in the movie into a straightforward superhero basically. And he didn't care for that. He really likes the anarchy part. Whereas David Lloyd was like all for it. He thought it was great. He loved seeing his scenes like brought to life on cinema and stuff like that, and spoke really highly of Natalie Portman and Hugo Weaving's performances, and basically kind of said some stuff about like, if you happen to be one of those people who likes the original so much that any change will automatically turn you off, like kind of side-eyeing like but yeah, so anyway, that's what popularized the mask. They didn't get popular before that, even though the comics had been out for a long time by then. And hilariously to me, Time Warner owns the rights to the image of that mask and is paid a fee with the sale of every one. And
Wow.
they are like a top selling mask on Amazon, which just the irony is so rich. Like, but yeah, so I guess to me, there are better Fascism 1 books out there, like Man in the High Castle and Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, this did have a big impact on comics. The art is really well done. So I think it might be interesting from that standpoint, but like, no going in what you're getting. I should have looked before.
Yeah, we could take a different movie with Natalie Portman and Hugo Weaving together, maybe.
I remember really liking the movie, but I haven't seen it since 2005, and it's entirely possible I liked it because of Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
Like, I liked anything she was in at that point. So I don't know. I should rewatch it. The movie got a bunch of accolades and is on a lot of best lists as well. It had some great like set design and cinematography and stuff. So I genuinely don't remember much about it. But the other thing that bugged me in the comic is like, if you're going to do science experiments on people, like a la the Holocaust stuff, which is what he does, like he names what he's injecting with people, and it's like a real thing that we know what it does. And then he completely makes up what it does. And we're just like, I don't know, science things like I'm totally fine with made up science as long as you do like the briefest of Google searches first, right? Yes, I realize you couldn't do a Google search when he wrote this, but like still, like you could have talked to somebody. So I don't know, that irked me a little, but like is not ultimately what stopped. That wouldn't have stopped me reading it. But yeah, I think we have grown in comics to get away from some of this. Like the people these days would have a lot to say about the fact that he just constantly is having them harm women to show versus like any other, like the Nazis did so much. If that's who you're trying to make them be like, which he is, like there's so many ways they were shitty. Like you could really go into it. And so I don't think something like this would be popular these days, or God, I hope it wouldn't be. So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I have not read this, and this is not encouraging me to read it.
Yeah, this has been on my I probably won't read this list just because I knew, I mean, I don't know the degree, but I knew that it was like pretty violent. And I think it's like, it shows you that in the 80s, early 80s, comics were kind of just written by dudes. Like the worst thing that could happen is like violence towards women. Okay, I guess.
Especially young women. Yep.
Yeah.
If you could replace this book in those top 100 English language comics list, what comic would you replace it with?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it. That's too, I'm not good enough at top of my head. I'm sorry. How about you guys? Do you have something that you love that isn't in those lists?
Let's go with the genderqueer.
Yeah. I love Spinning by, what is it, Tilly Walden?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just in terms of like getting people into comics, what about the Raina Telgemeier books?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Those are all bangers. I also really love and think it should be, if it's not already, on those lists, Ducks by Kate Beaton.
Yeah. All right. Moving on for a totally different change in topic. Paloma, tell us what you read.
So I decided to finally read Batman Year One with the writers Frank Miller. Artist is David Mazzucchelli, and the color artist is painter Richmond Lewis. And so this is like a Batman book. Also, this came out in 1987. I thought it was a 90s book, but I was like, whoa. Originally published in Batman 404 through 407. And this is like a classic Batman tale where like we follow his first year back in Gotham. And we're also following, at the time, Lieutenant Gordon's first year in Gotham as well. So that was like an interesting parallel. And this is a book that kind of gets recommended to so many people like interested in superhero comics. Like at the comic shop, I'm often recommending this book for people just like interested, but I haven't read it myself. And I've been like a Batman kid for like 20 years, never touched it. So finally did, and I loved it. I thought it was a really good read. I wasn't expecting so much of Gordon's point of view with like analyzing how corrupt the Gotham Police Department was. And a lot of like the mob influences there. So that was really interesting to see. He's like beloved by like the press, but he also has like he's not a perfect man. He's not a good husband
Yeah.
to a soon to be newborn. So that got me. I also absolutely loved the art. I feel like we're seeing like this classic Batman that when you're like picturing Batman, I feel like it inspired maybe the animated series Batman. It's just very sleek, very simple design. Lots of good like contrast with shadows and his cape kind of flying in the background. Really loved that stylistically. I feel like one of my biggest critiques is when we're in like Batman's point of view. His like text box is like his journal, and even though like I like to think I'm an adult that can read cursive, but his cursive was so hard for me to read on like Hoopla, where I was like, what are you saying? So I do feel like I lost a little bit there. Very confident in my font, my cursive font reading, but not this time around. But yeah, I really like the story. I think my hesitance for so long to read it was like the blueprint for these like we're gonna follow Batman at the start of his career, and I feel like those can get really derivative or repetitive. Or I'm just like I know what Batman was just like hopping around. I don't need to revisit him in his first year. So I think that was my hesitance with this, but you can see how it influences like all the Batman stories that I love, all like the Batman designs that I really, really like. So I'm glad I finally read it. I thought this like Goodreads theme was awesome because it worked in my favor at least. I read something that I thought was cool and wasn't too violent. I think another highlight with the artist especially is you see how awkward Batman is as he's learning to like fight crime. There's a scene where he's like on a fire escape and there's three like dudes he's trying to like break up, and him Batman just landing on the fire escape almost causes a guy to fall off, and he's like, oh damn, I can't let this guy fall to his death. And so he's just like so awkward and cute. He's like pigeon-toed in this scene a little bit. It's was just really good kind of like body language and like visualizing how he's like, oh, he like was fighting in like the mountains and stuff. He wasn't fighting in the city when he was like training to be Batman.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, I read this one in like 2013, so it's been a really hot minute. But I remember liking it, and particularly liking how they interweave his story and Gordon's.
Mm-hmm. You know, I thought that was really cool, really good parallels, and you get to see them mentally being like, I kind of got to actually work together with this guy if we want Gotham to succeed.
If I were to read a couple of Batman stories along with this one, and considering how much Batman you've read, what else should I read?
I'm very partial to a more like current story that came out maybe like a few years ago called Batman Universe. I feel like it mixes like Batman's a detective with like the more insane elements of like he's time traveling, he's in space. Yeah, he's still going to be overpowered and god tier sometimes, but he's also just like I feel like it captures like the wackiness of like that Batman could have. but while also at the end of the day, he's a detective. And that one's written by Brian Michael Bendis, and the art is Nick Darrington's art. And so I feel like he really captures like a fun vibe. So I'd say Batman universe for something modern if you wanted to be cool and be like, I don't think a ton of people have read this. And then have you read Batman Long Halloween?
I have.
Okay.
That's the one where you see, oh gosh, it's like Scarecrow and it's like Calendar Man or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Go through all the different villains.
Yeah, very unsettling.
Yes.
I really liked Snyder's Court of Owls.
Yes, that one I feel like is fantastic. I feel like that one brought me back into Batman comics when I thought I was like, I'm kind of done with this. Like, this is kind of boring stuff. I feel like that one was really cool, like introducing new elements to Gotham City that you see now being referenced. So yeah, I feel like Snyder's like Court of Owls. That one's really good.
The real answer is you should read Batwoman.
That's
yeah,
that as well.
I did read Batwoman Elegy.
Yeah.
Yes, so good.
So I'm getting there. I'm getting into the Batverse slowly.
What did you read for this, Kait?
So I read something that Nick and Mike have brought up quite a few times in passing on the show. I think that Mike really likes this book. So this is Chew Volume 1 by John Layman and art by Rob Guillory. And I have a story about how I read this book. So buckle up. So the last 7 days of every month, Hoopla Digital from your library puts up bonus borrows that don't count against your borrows. And thanks to Chad in the Goodreads group for pointing out that pattern, because I couldn't figure it out. Like, when do they have bonus borrows? And so Chew was one of the bonus borrows in December. And so I read volume 1 that way. And then I spent a borrow to read volume 2. And then I went to the local comic book shop and I found the entire series all together, packaged up in one neat little package in the discount bin. So I now own this entire series. So I'm committed. Nice. I say as a person who owns like 100 comics I haven't read yet, but now it's at least staring at me from the bookshelf.
Like in floppies, you got it?
No, this is all in volumes. Like, this is like nice. Okay. And I got it I did some math on it and it was like $6 or $7 a volume. So like half, 2/3 price or something. So it was a good enough deal that I was just like, I like the first 2 volumes, so I'm just committing some money to this, but not as much money as I would have otherwise. Anyway, so this book, Chew, is about a detective who can see the memories of the food that he eats. So that includes like the plants, the animals, and if he like gets human blood in his mouth or other body parts that he chews, he can see that person's or that corpse's memories. So this gets kind of gross sometimes, and he doesn't really like using his power. He like struggles to like eat meals. For some reason, beets don't trigger his power, so you see a lot of scenes of him like eating beets and lots of like cans of beets sitting around, and he's like a very slender character. But he gets roped into this like detective task force where he's expected to use this power. And so he ends up in some gross situations where they're like, we need this victim's memory. So, but something I did like about the first book is that he meets this woman who's a journalist and she can write descriptions of food in a way that makes people feel like they're eating that food. And the first time that you see her power, she's written a bad review and it makes people physically ill. And then you see him and he's like, I'm in love with this person because I can actually taste the food instead of sensing the memories. And so the juxtaposition of their 2 powers, I think it's really interesting. Like, they're not really opposite powers, but they do like complement one another in an opposing kind of way. But this is like, I'm making this sound like it's a slice of life story where you have these 2 funky powers. That's not really the case. Like, as I read on, there are cyborgs and vampires and like other random superpowers that are relevant to daily life. And so this is like a modern fantasy, I think would be the best way to label it. But I do really like the art style, particularly for the characters, because there's like this element of caricature in it, but in a way that is like pretty believable. Like I know I can imagine what these people look like as like live humans, but it really contributes to the way that I understand their characters. So like the main character, like I said, is really slender because he only eats beets because he has the superpower, and that works for his character. And then there's a character who is like very large and like he looks very imposing, and he is presented as a friendly character, but then you learn a little bit more about him. And considering like considering his character design, I wasn't completely surprised by like the turn that his character takes. And so I think that these are really like insightful ways to draw characters. And then I noticed that the female character has like, I think that she has more detail in her face than any of the other characters, which contributes one to her power, that you can like taste the food that she writes about because there's detail in it, like there's detail in her face. But also like this main character kind of fixates on her sometimes, so like the fact that there is more to her, like to her face and the art, I think that like complements that subplot. um and then there are a ton of puns in this book, and I
Yep.
really like puns. And they're like subtle enough that I kind of have to look for them to find all of them sometimes, because they are like just, some of them are just like turns of phrase that we use, but the fact that they are in this book that is about food, that has a lot of food puns, it like lends a, oh, this is a pun rather than just a turn of phrase. So, for example, the omnibus volumes that they've released, they're called the omnivore volumes.
Love that.
So, yeah, so there's 12 volumes of the series, and I am through volume 2. So hopefully I will continue and finish the series, considering how many times Nick and Mike have mentioned it. Have you guys read this?
I read volume 1 at least a decade ago because of Mike and Nick, like when I first started on the show. So actually it would have been like exactly a decade ago. And I agree that it is really good. I really like the art. I did not keep going because it made me physically nauseous at certain
Oh, no.
parts. Like I was reading it while I had surgery on a busted ankle, like to put it back together, and was like the pain meds make me slightly nauseous to begin with. So like I have had volume 2 on my to read list since then, because I'm like I should revisit this when I don't already have like a baseline degree of nausea. And it's never been top of the pile. You know how it goes? It's just never top of the pile. So now it's super easy to access. It's so old that you can just get like all of it on Hoopla if you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I should revisit it. I should. There's a reason it ran for so long.
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with anything else that John Layman has written or Rob Guillory has done?
Yeah, so I read Rob Guillory's Farmhand, the first volume or first
Yeah.
2 volumes
Okay.
of that. I also love his art, and I really liked Farmhand. I thought that it's another like food concept. Not as gross, but I liked that one because you're like following a family who runs a farm, and I unfortunately can't remember the pitch or like the hook, but something science related and science like gone wrong.
I swear I read Farmhand #1.
But I also read like the first 6 volumes of Chew, and then maybe I caught up in real time. And I think then the transition from volumes to single issue weight, I haven't gone back and finished. It also, I feel like some of the subplots that you're introduced, like you meet like the start of these subplots, I feel like volume 1, volume 2. So it is impressive that they're carrying on. But some of the subplots became absolutely wild, and I was like, I was kind of just here for Tony, but sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to read Chew, and then I'm also going through like two different, like more wholesome food manga series, Restaurant to Another World, and then Otherworldly Izakaya Nobu, and like very different tonally from from this kind of food comic. But I'm like hungry all of the time now because I'm reading these books.
I'm
But
trying to think if I read another John Layman book. There was a series he had with maybe an artist called Nick Patera, but I feel like it came out just around the time of like early 2020, and I feel like it fizzled, unfortunately. But yeah, some of his stuff is a little gross in I guess complimentary way, but not in a way that I'm necessarily pursuing.
yeah, it looks like he did Outer Darkness, and I've got that on my to-read list.
I did actually really like Outer Darkness. I like that series a lot.
That's good. What other comics that are popular have you guys been meeting to read?
I mean, until recently, I was gonna finish Sandman, but now, woof, absolutely not. Dude belongs in prison.
I want to read Unwritten. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah,
was that popular enough to mention it?
Yeah, I feel like that one was,
it had its moment. Yeah.
Okay. I think that we have volume 1 floating around here someplace, but I think that is also all on Hoopla, if I recall. And that one's got a number. I think it's got a number of volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Quick Google says 11.
Whoa.
So yeah, I need to finish Chew before I start another long series.
Yeah, because I've only been reading from the library for several years now. Basically anything in the last few years that came out and got a lot of hype and awards and stuff is on my like was popular and still need to read because I just haven't had access to it yet. But I, similar to Paloma was saying with Chew, where she like caught up and then lost track of it. That's where I was with the Firefly comics. And I really liked the ones I read, but then I got caught up and just dropped off. And I need to go back. Now there's like 4 more volumes than the last time I was there. And I want to go pick those back up.
I was collecting those in hardcover and I didn't read them for so long that I stopped getting to the comic shop to buy the new hardcovers because I had like 6 that I hadn't read. And I don't know if I'll be able to find those. I feel like those are short print runs.
I wonder, yeah.
But yeah, they got some new writers on those when they like broke off from the main group. I think that they're focusing on new characters now.
I think so, based off of covers.
Yeah, so I want to get into that.
I like that world a lot.
Yeah.
Similar to Unwritten, well, maybe not. They just have a similar cover in my head, but this one's not 11 volumes. Daytripper?
Okay.
I feel like it's written by either 2 brothers or 2 relatives.
Yeah, I did read that. Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba. I've
heard of it.
But yeah, I just remember people talking about it. It's a single volume. I feel like Gabriel Ba is the artist for Umbrella Academy. So
I don't know.
I like his stuff.
Is there only 1 volume of Daytripper?
Yeah, that's what's enticing.
Okay. I thought I remembered 3 volumes. Maybe I read this when I was reading Alex and Ada and that had 3 volumes.
Oh, that one's a good one.
When you say that's what's enticing, that's the thing for me. As the older I get, the more my deep and abiding love for OGNs has developed, where it's just a one and done. Like, give me a good first, second OGN, and we have our afternoon.
Yeah, I agree. I have unfortunately taken to treating the used section of a comic book store or the discount section, I guess, as a library. I'm like, if these are only $3, this is what I'm getting.
Hey, but sometimes you score big, like you said. Like I had that recently happen with finishing out my run of the Revival paperback trades. I was missing the like last 3, and they had them for like $3 a piece. And they looked unread, like they looked like they were volumes they just never sold versus like actually used.
Yeah, I read the first volume of that and I loved it. That's another one that I need to go back and read because, I really
I
enjoyed
haven't
it.
finished it yet. It's just sitting there waiting, staring at me. Like, why are you checking out more books, Kait? We're sitting right here.
Yeah. That's another long series. That's 8 volumes?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. 8 or 9.
I've been trying to go back and dig out the things that I added to my to-read list when I started tracking a to-read list, and I'm at the point now where the next 5 things on it are all series, and so I'm like, what do I do? Do I just read volume 1, or do I read the whole thing, or wing it?
That's the tough part. And what I do think is cool about this topic is I haven't read Revival, and I feel like that was a critically acclaimed Image series.
Yep.
Chew is also critically acclaimed, and I feel like these series don't get brought up anymore unless you're already into comics or you have friends who are into comics with you to recommend you this stuff. So
Right.
Revival definitely feels like one that would be good to recommend to people that aren't into comics. I remember when we were doing comic book club together, Paloma, that was one when it was everyone's already heard to read Saga to get into comics, but here's another one that I'd say that it was very good into just are you into genre fiction?
Yeah. Love that stuff.
This is the one where they think that a woman is dead and then she shows up, right?
Yes.
I think
Okay,
so.
I swear I read this on the porch, which means outside. But apparently I read this in February last year. So I must be remembering a different book. Don't think I read this in February last year because it is February when we air this, and when we're recording this at the end of January, it is 10 degrees outside. So
yeah.
All right. Does anybody have anything else to add for this topic?
No, this has been fun. Thanks for hanging out, you guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna go read more popular comics that are 15 years old.
Me too. Yep.
I mean, this made me want to go back and rewatch the V for Vendetta film.
Yeah. Natalie Portman.
Exactly.
Get a
in
good
a buzz cut. She looks so cool. She was 11 before 11.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a good point. Yeah, get a Natalie Portman film marathon going for the rest of your weekend. Sounds like a good time. All right. Well, thank you for recording today. Thank you for listening. And again, if you are on Goodreads, check out our Goodreads group. And thanks, Nick, for proofreading. And as always, comics are good, and so are you.